We met 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, somewhere around there, Ted. Yeah.
Maybe 5. I don't know. There's that 2-year gap in our lives. So.
Yeah, the pandemic kind of either adds to it or shortens it.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about your book. When did it come out? A couple months ago, right? Or six
In
months ago?
August, yeah, about
August.
August actually, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about your book and how your little bit of your background.
Okay, all right. So our book is called The Unbreakable Marriage, and it's a co-written book. Me and my wife Sulojana together we wrote it, and the book really came out of our experience of mentoring couples who are at the point of giving up on their marriage. In a very very short time. Usually, it took no more than 10 to 12 weeks for them to get back on track. And so we've been doing that for 6 years actually. It's hard to believe. Again, time passed really flows by. And so about 2 years ago, we were just kind of saying, hey, how can we, reach a larger audience with our message of breakthrough for couples facing breakdown? And so a coach that I was working with at the time said, you got to write a book, but not just write a book, like a shook, where you just share a little bit, just spill the beans, let people have it all. Because if your goal is really for people's marriages to get back on track, the more people that can pick up your book and start applying and get results, the better. And so that's how we started writing the book. It took a lot longer than I thought it would before getting published. As you very well know, Ted, when you write a book, it doesn't always stick to your timelines because there's quite a few other people involved in the process. But finally, we were able to get it in the hands of people this August.
I like what you said about you have to go all in and give them everything in the book, because if you're trying to save your marriage, you can't play half-heartedly, right?
Exactly. And we couldn't, I mean, I know there's a very successful business model where, you write a book, establish yourself as an authority, you give enough to make the book worth reading, but not the whole thing, because you want people to contact you and so on. And I know that model works very well for people. As a matter of fact, we even looked at that model, but we felt for what we were doing, and we have a vision. The vision was to save 50,000 marriages from divorce in the next 5 years. And we thought, well, for that to happen, we cannot be doing 50,000 consultations on our own. we,
Right.
we need to have something in the hands of people, and of course, invite others to also duplicate the process that we've created that has produced good results.
Did the pandemic cause more marriages to fail or struggle?
Well, what happened, the pandemic did is actually exacerbated the problems that were already there. So, in other words, like let's say, like take a couple where both are working outside the home and both go away. They don't spend enough time with each other. So the time they spend with each other is minimal. And so you can bury your issues, when you don't really interact with each other quite that much. But one of the things that the pandemic cost people is to be in each other's face quite a bit more. Even if you worked remotely in separate office rooms or whatever, you still had more time of interacting with each other. And if there are children involved, then like the tension just seemed to come to the forefront more, and you couldn't escape it. You couldn't just go to a bar,
Right.
go to somebody else's place just to get away from it all. And so I think, like I was actually talking to a lawyer, family lawyer, about a year or so into the pandemic. And so I said, like, have you noticed an increase in cases? He said, actually, it really has not been an increase, but the people that contact us want to get it done right away. They want the divorce right away. They just can't stand it anymore. So, so it intensified the problems. Like we have a saying, and the saying is that a crisis does not cause problems. A crisis exposes the problems or the cracks, that were already there. And I think
Yeah.
that's what the pandemic did.
Yeah, I know at least 2 couples that ended up getting divorced because they're 24/7 being together.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
exacerbated the issues.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
they got it done quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the pattern that a lot of lawyers have been reporting. Yeah.
Right. So you have a little saying about giving birth to marriage problems.
Okay, so our the whole statement is there are no such things as marriage problems, quote unquote, but two individuals, who are coupled together with their own problems, coupled together in a marriage, and together they will give birth to marriage problems. And I'll just give you a little bit of the background of that. I was a pastor for over 35 years. And so when you're, in the pastoring profession, then you do have couples coming to you with problems in their marriage. And of course, like in my case, I did not have a lot of counseling training, to be able to work with them, like intensely and so on. So a lot of times we referred people to others, but I would try to help them with something so they would be, at least have some semblance of peace for a while. And I'll give you one of the classic things that often happened is somebody would come and say, you know what, we're fighting all the time. We don't know how to resolve conflict. So I would pull out this nice, neat little pattern, which actually was a very good pattern that I got from a book, and I'd help them work through the problem and say, here, take this home and work through it, and you'll do fine whenever other problems come. Well, it was working for a while, and then they would call again. It's like, hey, what's going on? What do you mean you can't solve a problem? I gave you the blueprint. It's not working. Well, actually, we can't even get to the blueprint. We don't. Our conflict's so bad that we can't even agree to use the blueprint. And
Oh,
so, so at that point, I began to wonder, like, is there something else here at the root that is preventing them from getting that point? Because they have a solution to their marriage problem, in hand, but they couldn't use it. And so it took me a few years later to actually discover the fact that when we get married, when two people come together in marriage, you are bringing with you who you are, what you experience, all that you went through, all your belief systems, and so on from before. And
yeah.
so when you start coming into marriage, you already have, you can call it baggage, where you can have problems. It could be, trauma, it could be abuse, it could be just like somebody just putting you down all the time, all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so, and it's not that like any of us are immune to that, but when we come in with those hurts and those hurts have not been healed, that's when problems start to surface in the marriage. Because when something goes wrong, like for example, let's say there's a young woman, who has dealt with her father abandoning the household. One day he's leaving. He says, "I'm going," and never comes back. Now she's married. Husband, says, "Honey, I'm going out, for this meeting," and he's 2 hours late. Immediately she reacts. She sends him like a nasty text, right? Because she's hurting and she's acting out of the hurt that she had with her father.
Right.
But now the poor guy gets a text and saying, I just got delayed. My meeting went longer. Like, why is she so upset? And now, if they start focusing on why she got upset, why didn't you tell me? You're focusing on the marriage problem. So
Right.
instead, what we really need to focus on is the individual problem. Like, why did I respond that way? Why did I react that way? What inside of me made me, send that nasty text? What hurt am I still carrying? And so now, and usually, Ted, like the answer is very simple. Whenever we have a hurt that we've been carrying, is to forgive the person that caused the hurt, even if they're not alive anymore. Like just to forgive them, let go, and that will begin the healing process. But if you don't do that, then your spouse can become your enemy, and that's not a good place to be.
It's interesting you mentioned that. We had a neighbor once that he had a similar thing. His wife went shopping, and she was gone shopping at this, at the mall for 4 hours. And he's calling us and like, where is she? Something happened to her. And he's calling the police and like, Jack, she just
I
went to
know.
the mall. So he
Yeah,
obviously had some issues from that he was bringing.
exactly. And most of the time, we're not aware of them immediately, and that's why like it's good to sit with a counselor or a therapist, somebody who can actually help you to get to the root
Right.
of why you are behaving in an extreme way or reacting excessively to what is not really a major problem.
Right. What about grudges? You talk about, people have grudges with each other.
Yeah, one of the things that we're finding with couples that come to us, by the time they come to us, for help, they almost feel like they're like past the point of no return. Like there's no way they can put things back, too much water on the bridge, and so on. And so when we start probing a little bit deeper, what we find is that, well, let me put it this way: in every marriage, your spouse is going to hurt you, and if they haven't hurt you yet, don't worry, they will. Just give them some time.
Wow.
I mean, hurting means like, a cutting word, or like something that's a rejection. When you're trying to want to do something, like all these kind of things. So you will experience some kind of a hurt in your marriage, and when that hurt happens, then if you just let it build, we as human beings, we do fight or flight.
Yeah.
So either we'll just just burst out, and now it escalates and gets out of control, or after a while, and I've had people say to us, both of us have heard people say to us, well, afterwards I thought that outburst was not worth it. So why would I bring it up? Because I know I was going to get yelled at, screamed at, thrown at, whatever. And so it was much safer, or like less, like it didn't disturb the peace quite as much if I just kept it to myself.
Mhm.
Now, there are certain times when using restraint is actually good. As a matter of fact, one of the techniques we teach couples is to call a timeout. If the conflict gets a little too intense, and before it escalates, a cooling off period, then come back. So that's good. However, when you keep it inside of yourself and you don't bring it out at a later time, like for example, with the timeout technique, what you do is like just like in a basketball game, let's say, a timeout has a definite duration,
Right.
and so that after a certain time the game will resume. Well, the same thing with a couple when they have conflict. You could say, okay, I'm sorry, I can't deal with this right now, but how about we talk about it after the kids go to bed, like, or tomorrow morning, or whatever the case may be. But then if you don't set that time, and if you don't deal with it, and you just let it sit there, you may be able to get by with it for a little while, but usually the way you treat your spouse will start changing, because now you may get abrupt, and they say, I didn't think I deserved you for you to be that abrupt. Why is that? Well, it's usually because you've got something deep down inside of you that you haven't let out, that needs to be resolved. And so when you start piling those one on top of the other, like essentially nursing grudges, the grudges which may have been like just like a mouse size, then grow into a monster. And
Yeah.
so all of a sudden, what happens is when they pile up, you start looking at your spouse differently. So this person all of a sudden is not the one that you loved and fell in love with and got married and so on. This person is this person is this monster who's always out to get me, who never lets me have my way, like all those kind of things. And so when grudges will make you change the lens through which you view your spouse. And that's why it's better not to nurse grudges. It's better to forgive as quickly as you can and move towards resolution. Again, not before, like, don't wait till a lot of time has elapsed before you deal with stuff. Like the Bible has a saying, don't let the sun go down on your anger, meaning before you go to bed, take care of stuff. And
Right.
so, yeah.
Is there a recommended timeout period you recommend? Like a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Well, I think there are two determining factors. One is the temperament of the people involved, as well as the nature of the issue. So sometimes, like, it may be something very, very simple, like you forgot to do something and you get mad and you have a little fight. Okay, let's just take 15 minutes, cool off, and come back and talk about it. It'll work,
Yeah.
you know. But let's say the issue is way more serious. Like I went and spent, like $5,000 on something without talking to you. Okay, now your spouse is going to be really mad, and they should be. And so now at that point, if we meet in 15 minutes, unless your spouse says we're going to talk about it like right now, let's just go and deal with it right away, fine. But if they get really upset and are not in a place to really deal with it honestly, then you're better off to say, you know what, I know this is a serious issue and I do want to talk more about it, and but I just can't do it right now.
Yeah.
How about we, yeah. So in that case, it might be a matter of a few hours. Generally speaking, it's best to find a time when you will not be interrupted by anything else. And that's why a lot of times, like in Slojan, in my case, whenever we have conflicts, which by the way we still do from time to time after 39 years,
Yeah.
we tend to leave them for the end of the day, because otherwise our schedule is so packed. Well, for her during the day, working hours. For me also, I'm doing a lot of stuff in the daytime, and then quite often we do our marriage mentorship, and I have other stuff that I do in the evening. So it's towards the end of the day, meaning like after 9 or 10 o'clock, we'll sit down and let's go through it, let's hash this out. And that again for us is a time. Of course, we don't have kids at home anymore, so we don't
Yeah.
have those kind of interruptions, but we won't have any other kind of work related or family related interruptions, because we know that's our time, and so we can sit through and calmly and coolly go through something.
Right. Boy, I've read your book when it was before it was published. I remember a
Yes.
lot of stories. You have some amazing stories in the book.
Yeah, one of the things we decided to do, of course, for confidentiality reasons, we cannot share all that couples have, gone through that, go through a mentorship. So we do make reference here and there to something a couple may have brought with. But one of the things that we both decided is we're going to be transparent about our struggles,
Yeah.
some of the actual incidents that happened, and the consequences that were not always pretty. But how did we actually find a way to work through it? And so yeah, and that way, like one of the things we have people tell us is, like, we really appreciate the fact that you guys shared your struggles, because they may not have been the exact struggles they went through,
Yeah.
but yeah, we had struggles, with finances. We had troubles resolving conflict. We had troubles with sexual issues, all this kind of stuff. And so yeah, so the more transparent we were, the better it is for the readers.
So is there one factor you've seen over the years that's like money or something, drugs or alcohol, that makes marriages fail more?
Well, a lot of times it's not external stuff. In other words, like somebody goes and really gets, like I mean, obviously, like drugs and those kind of things can cause huge problems
Right.
in a marriage. A lot of times it's actually a buildup of unresolved issues. So there's resentment. Like there's this bit of a progression. You start by getting irritated, then you get angry. You don't get from anger, you move to resentment. From resentment, you move to bitterness. And like there's an expression in the Bible that talks about bitter roots. And so when the bitterness then begins to put roots in, now things start to grow way out of proportion. And
Yeah.
so that, more often than not, uh, you know uh, if I were to maybe characterize like one particular issue that tends to lead people to the point of wanting to give up is neglect. Like you neglect each other, you take each other for granted. So
Yeah.
in the beginning, you're wooing and awing over everything that your spouse does, more often than not before marriage, and maybe the first year of marriage, everything is a novelty. And then afterwards, you just take each other for granted. And after a while, that can turn into contempt, it can turn into lack of respect. The Gottmans, who are relationship experts, say that contempt is always a surefire sign that the couple is headed to divorce, because you allowed it to get to that point. And so if you don't, if you go on a good marriage maintenance plan right off the bat, put some structures in there, set some time apart for just the two of you, and make that a habit right from the get-go, which by the way we didn't.
Yeah.
Like, like when we were first married, I was pastoring a fairly large church. And so like I was never home. And
Hmm.
so like the church was really taking the place of my wife, and she got the leftovers, which of course you can get by on leftovers for a while, but after a while they go stale.
Yeah.
And so then we had to have some conversations and change my schedule around, to make sure that there was a parcel of time that was just for the two of us, where there was no interference. In those days we didn't have cell phones, so these days, in those times, I had to put my cell phone away so I don't get interrupted. So yeah, but I would say taking each other for granted, neglecting some of the simple things, like expressing appreciation to each other, like even to exchange signs of affection, whether it's words, hugs, all these kind of things that you're very generous with in your courting period. That when you make that part of your marriage on a regular basis, you're less likely to run into issues.
That makes sense. As you date, you're young and you have no responsibilities other than job. You get married, have kids, your jobs get more stressful. You end up neglecting each other and not appreciating each other.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The other thing that we've found, Ted, is that, and this is true of me as well, growing up, like nobody ever really taught me, or my wife, how to resolve conflict when it happens.
Yeah.
So the way we learn how to resolve conflict often depends upon the models that we had. And of course, initially the models are our parents, and then maybe we have models in our workplace. And if they were healthy models, then you do well. But unfortunately, a lot of times they are not, because people will resolve just to get rid of conflict. A lot of times, okay, we're going to do it this way. That's it, and I'm out of here. That type of thing, or have it your way. I don't want to get involved. That attitude. Or you go to work. In the workplace, quite often there are punitive measures. So when
Right.
you run into conflict, then there's some kind of a punishment. So if those are the models that you're exposed to, then you will try to resolve conflict in your marriage the same way. And trust me, it doesn't work very well.
Right.
Okay. And so one of the things that we are actually getting quite a bit of requests right now is actually, how can you tailor your material to help couples prepare for marriage better, so they don't get to the repair stage, or for them to use this like a toolkit. You may not need to use it right away, but when conflict comes, there's something you can pull out, a pattern that you can take out and follow. Because if you don't have that, this is what we find. Unfortunately, especially this, we find it more among younger couples than not. Immediately, the thought is, I think, you know what? I don't think you love me anymore. And that's why you're treating me like that. I think you hate me. Maybe we should have never married. My mom told me that you were a little bit suspect. Like, you kind of go on that track, and of course, for the most part in the Western world, getting a divorce is not that tough, and so divorce becomes a very viable option way too quickly. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that a marriage should not end in divorce. There are good grounds for that, even in the Bible. However, if that's the first thought that comes, just because you're not getting along, no, if you had learned some patterns, like I'll give you a quick example. We had a couple come to us, very young in their marriage, by the way, and and he basically developed a pattern where, just as I said a while ago, when he brought something up, she would explode, and so he would keep everything to himself. Now, if he had, we taught him something, would change things around. But if he had learned that before they got married about how to express your hurt, so without like getting into blaming, because as soon as somebody blames us for something, we get defensive. you
Right.
know so instead, I'll just give this to you as a freebie for all of your viewers today. If you can express your hurt using it's generally known in the counseling world as I statements, the letter I. And the way the statement goes is, so I say to my wife, "Sulojana, when you went shopping, and you didn't tell me that you were going shopping, then I felt worried, or like, because I wasn't sure where you were." So in other words, it's when you and I feel, or I felt. So when you booked that trip without consulting me, I felt unimportant. I felt left out. When you made that purchase, without consulting with me first, then I felt, like what am I here for?
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff. And so when you phrase it that way, now the person who is receiving that from you, first of all, you're not minimizing the issue, because you're very forthright. When you did this or said this, that's the issue that we need to resolve. But then secondly, it's like, hey, it affected me at an emotional level.
Right.
So now I'm not blaming you, but I'm pointing out what you did wrong, but saying, hey, like, do you realize how it made me feel? And when you're married to each other, like, the last thing you want to do is make your spouse feel like let down, or disappointed, or discouraged, or upset, or worried, or whatever, right? And so at that point, it tones it down, and now it creates an atmosphere where you can now go back and you can use like a certain pattern, for example, to resolve the conflict.
That's great. It's a lot of times we're tired, we're stressed, and then you say something to your spouse that really hurts them, and you're like, you feel bad, but they
Yeah.
come back, this is what you made me. And we have a question here. Maybe this. Well, here you go.
Okay.
Look at that, fancy. I think we just talked about would solve this problem, right?
What are your thoughts when one of the people in the relationship does not want to work with you because they believe everything that's wrong is because of you? Okay. That is a very, very tough place to be. And like we've had couples like that book a consultation with us, and we've actually had to say to them, listen, if you are going to continue to believe that, we can't help you. And so, when we're very picky about that, we only work with couples, where both of them are really willing to work at making things happen. Now, the only I'm going to speak this from a little more of a Christian perspective, maybe than anything else, because that's my perspective that I'm most familiar with. The only thing that we advise a spouse, who has an uncooperative spouse, like a spouse who's not willing to admit that they need help, is for you to change the best that you can. Because there are times when it may look like like your spouse is not being cooperative, but there may be some things that you are doing or saying that are triggering them, that might be inadvertently even contributing to the way they are. So in that case, there's hope, that as you keep changing, as you keep softening your heart towards them and forgiving. But when somebody is kind of recalcitrant and they say, no, no, that's like there's nothing wrong with me, it's all you, and I don't need to change in any way at all, it becomes very tough. And you may have to decide, how long do I endure this? And we don't believe in ultimatums. However, you need to point out, to your spouse, what, if this is the way it's going to continue, then like this is not the way to do marriage. And
Right.
so, like, where are you at in terms of a marriage? Like, you ask that kind of a tough question rather than saying, we're going to get divorced. No, it's like, ask that person, where are you at? Because if you believe that I'm the one to totally blame and you're not going to take any responsibility, that's not a marriage. In a marriage, both of us have to take responsibility and work at things together. So, unfortunately, there are a couple that come to us with in that kind of a space, and that's the best we can tell them is, what, you work on yourself, change what you can change or what you need to change about you. And sometimes when people do that, it turns the other person around because they begin to notice a change. Why are you not responding the way you used to? And it makes them think, like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I'm the one in the wrong. But that's not guaranteed.
Would that work if somebody was blaming me? I said, well, when you blame me for everything, I feel blah, blah, blah. Would that help to?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great place to use that, I statement. Yeah, this is how I feel. Now, again, your spouse can respond very negatively to that as well.
Right.
They may not be even willing to accept. Well, what do you mean? Well, I don't care how you feel. Like that. That could be one of the responses. On the other hand, that could make them at least think, oh, I'm making you feel that way when I do that. And so it's a very, very tricky situation. We wish nobody was in that, but unfortunately, it is a reality in some
Yeah.
marriages.
Because if you love someone, you should care about them. But if you don't care about them, love them anymore, then it's time for a divorce. Right.
Yeah, and you have to ask the question, like, why are we in this marriage together?
Right.
If, or why do you want to be in this marriage together if you don't believe that there's anything like wrong with you, or
Right.
I'm the only one at fault? And like the simple thing that we always tell people is, when you point one finger at the other, there's three pointing back at you.
Exactly.
And you can't tell your spouse that, because that might make them really upset. But that's the truth. That's the fact, right? That when somebody just blames the other person, they need to accept responsibility for what they might be doing.
I just
And
have
if
a
they,
picture of them trying to talk to me and they cover their ears. It's your fault.
Exactly. Yeah.
So here's your website, thesams.ca. And can you get your book there and Amazon?
Yeah, our book is available on Amazon outlets worldwide. On the American side, you can also get it on barnesandnoble.com. And on the Canadian side, there's another book retailer called Chapters. So the Chapters website also, you can order it from there.
Do you have a copy to hold up?
Yes, of course.
I hope you're gonna say. I hope you have one.
So now on Amazon, we noticed there's a couple of other books with the same title. So you really have to look for The Unbreakable Marriage with this. None of them has this particular graphic, and none of them will say Jeeva and Sulojana Sam as the authors right there in the burgundy. So if you are looking for Unbreakable Marriage and then Sam, you will end up getting the right book. But this is what it looks like.
Great. We've got somebody putting best adult dating sites on our chat. We've drawn attention to spammers.
I know that happened to us last week when we were on Restream as well on the YouTube site. Somebody kept on putting all this stuff. So
that's where this is coming from. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, this is the YouTube thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
If you have a question about marriage, please ask.
This is great. The book is great. I've really enjoyed. I had the pre-release edition of it. It's really very helpful.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Ted. And when you go to that website, like let's say somebody's watching here that you genuinely need help with your marriage, or you might know somebody that needs help with their marriage, then when you go to the website, there's a place where you can actually apply for a meeting with us, where we'll do a deep dive on what you're going through. Just like Ted, your method, where when you go book the date on the calendar, it asks a couple of questions just to give us a little overview of what to expect. And I especially want to say a quick word. I just got this little bit of a nudge today. Our marriage was an arranged marriage. So our parents actually brought us together, and that's very common in the Indian tradition. And I just felt like, there are maybe people, watching this, or you may know somebody who is in an arranged marriage and ran into all sorts of difficulties. It's an interesting statistic that if you're living in India, the divorce rate for arranged marriages is under 5%. If you're living in the US, the divorce rate for arranged marriages is actually 50%. Which basically means that there are some issues that you're having adapting, to the new culture, the new place, and of course, the way the divorce is very easily available here. And so I just want to say a special appeal to anybody who's raised in that culture or another culture where maybe you were brought together in an arranged marriage and you're having difficulties. We can relate. And so we'd like you to just reach out. That's the advice we give everybody is like there's hope for any marriage, and there's help available. You just have to reach out and ask, and no obligation. You just have to reach out and ask. If all we do is have a good conversation, we're totally okay with that.
And how many years you've been married?
39 years in August.
Okay. Yeah, we're 36, so we're right behind you.
There you go.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, Ted. Good to talk to you. God bless. Okay.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.